everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books that I read in 2020. So I'm filming in yet another new location in my library. I'm trying like everything just to see what I like the most. I'm also standing today because I hate, I'll be watching myself edit I'll be editing. So I'm watching myself and I'm like, you are slouching. What are you doing with your hands? I'm still gonna do weird stuff with my hands, but at least I can't slouch. And my sweater always goes all weird and I don't like it. So we're trying out standing. I'm sure I'll find something to criticize about myself, but here we are. So in 2020, I read exactly 250 books. So making this list was really hard because most of them were really, really good. I did give 50 of the books that I read 5 stars, but when I looked at the list again, I was like, yeah, some of those didn't really deserve it. So on my first round of edits, I got it down to 37, and then I was like, okay, this is too many. So I've managed to pick 15 books that I think were my favorites. I do feel like I was a little bit biased towards ones that I read at the end of the year. I got really back into books and specifically started watching BookTube in May, I think. So around then I started reading more intentionally. Before then I was still reading, but just, maybe kind of more randomly and I don't know where I heard of the books that I found. So yeah, there are a lot on here that I've read in the last couple months, especially since September, but that's fine. I tried to be unbiased and we'll see how it went. I actually have all of them with me as well, except for one, which is cool. The other thing is that I have series included as one item on this list and nothing is ranked. So I'm really cheating, but this is the best I could come up with because I felt like I was being so mean to all the other books. So you get what you get. So one of the first series I want to talk about is the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. So when I first started watching BookTube, I saw these books on the back of someone's shelf and I was like, those are really pretty books. So I looked them up and they are so good. So I love a dystopia. I still love to reread all the 2012 Hunger Games type dystopians, but these are a new age of dystopians. I'm gonna put 2 of them down because they're heavy. And these are YA, but I think that they're really sophisticated. They've got a lot of different messages and morals in them. And they're just so good. I would recommend them to I tell my dad to read them, I tell my sister, and they have very different reading tastes from me. So I think these are gonna be a good bet for a lot of people. But these are set in a futuristic world where we've basically conquered death. We've conquered illness. There's an AI who's basically the cloud who's in charge of everything. He keeps the world running perfectly and smoothly. But since we've conquered death, obviously there's an overpopulation issue. So there's a group of humans called Scythes who are basically Grim Reapers. They're in charge of keeping the population under control. The arc of the series kind of follows corruption within those Scythes because as you can imagine, some people who do that job might kind of end up doing something nefarious. There's also a romance plot in the series, but it was never the main focus, which I really liked. It was kind of an added element to the backdrop of the dystopian world. And yeah, there was so much interesting stuff in here about death and morality, and I'll be thinking about them for a long time. Book 2 was actually my favorite, which is rare. So I loved book 1, it was a great introduction, but book 2 kind of really took it to the next level. Book 3 is a million pages long, so it took me a while to read, and I felt like it dragged a little bit. The ending was also so not what I would have thought the ending was going to be at the beginning of the series. And I don't think I disliked it. It was just kind of out of left field. So that's fine. But yeah, this is the first series on my list. Next is a book that I'm really surprised I'm including on this list, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I'm not a big classic person. I wish that I was, but I just generally don't find them that interesting. But this one I actually did, so that was awesome. I tend to really like children's classics, like Secret Garden and Little Women and stuff. But Rebecca was my first adult one that I was like, yes, this is genuinely good. But it's a girl who's working as a companion to a rich woman in the south of France, and then she ends up marrying this man and going back to his mansion in England. And there's this creepy gothic atmosphere. She almost feels like she's being haunted by the ghost of his former wife, and not haunted literally, but just that kind of vibe, So yeah, I had a great time reading this. It was super creepy and easy to read while still feeling impactful with the writing style and everything like that. I did watch it after the movie, which I think was a great way to make me enjoy it more. So I'm gonna try watching classic movies before I read the books first, just so that I already know the plot and the characters and I can just focus on the writing. Because reading shouldn't be a chore, and sometimes it feels like it is with classics for me. But not with this one. It was great, 5 stars. If I did have to rank this list, this would be number 1, and I think that's the only choice that I could make. I couldn't rank everything else, but this I could. And that is The Strange the Dreamer duology by Laini Taylor. So I don't know why I waited so long to read this. I love the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. I've got a whole shrine here now. I have 3 editions of each book. I remember reading the plot summary and thinking it didn't sound interesting. So idiot. Plot summary is so weird, it's not going to sound good when I describe it either. So honestly, I'm not going to. You should just read these no matter what. I don't care about the plot, that's not the point. The characters and the writing are just breathtakingly perfect. Laini Taylor is everything to me. I will read anything she writes. I just ordered like all of her old books, which are super random and I've never heard talked about. There's like one unfinished middle grade series and one like fairy romance question mark, but I was like, yep, Laini Taylor wrote it, I'm ordering it. I truly can't stop thinking about these, and I read them, I think, on Thanksgiving. Yeah, so in like October, Canadian Thanksgiving. One of my biggest goals for reading now is to, you know, kind of remember things more. I tend to read a book and then almost immediately forget the plot, but I didn't with these ones, which is really rare for me. So yeah, I can't recommend these enough. If you like lyrical writing, you're gonna absolutely love these. If you hate that, you might not like these, but I think you should still try them because I am so obsessed. Next up is the one book that I don't have with me, and it's kind of like a tie between two books that are by different authors, but similar genres. So they are Home Before Dark by Riley Sager and The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I did not know that I liked thrillers, specifically terrifying haunted house thrillers. I've been getting into mysteries this year because I was never into them at all, but I think that every time I get one now, I'm just trying to recreate the terror that Home Before Dark and The Turn of the Key gave me, and I don't know why, because I don't like being scared. I don't like watching scary movies. I refuse. So why do I like these books? I have no idea, because I genuinely could not sleep after I read them. But if you have any good haunted house thriller recommendations or something that's actually gonna like keep me up at night, why am I like this? Please let me know, because I have read a couple good thrillers lately, but they're just like more murder mysteries, and that's not the vibe I'm looking for. So anyway, Home Before Dark and The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware are basically, the common thread is that it's someone in a house trying to figure out whether they're being haunted by something paranormal or whether there's an actual person doing something. So when I think about it, they were pretty similar, but I just had a really good time reading them both, and they really stuck with me. So that's why I'm putting them on here. Not necessarily because of the writing, because I'm not super familiar with thrillers to know whether the writing was awesome. Just the impact that they've left on me, and maybe that's from the fear, I don't know, but this is my list, so. In the vein of mysteries, I have the first two books in the Truly Devious series. I did read book 3, but it was like a 4-star, I think, maybe a 3.5. So I'm just putting books 1 and 2 on here because they were 5 stars, obviously. Truly Devious follows Stevie Bell, who's accepted to the prestigious Ellingham Academy. She is really into true crime, and she's planning to solve an unsolved murder that took place at Ellingham like a century or 2 centuries before. I think that the reason I liked these so much was that I really connected with Stevie. She has anxiety, and I felt it was very relatable and very well done, so I just kind of like could really easily see myself in this book. But they were really interesting too. Like the setting was great, very wintry, so I feel like I should have waited to read them in the winter, but I love anything set at a school. Honestly, that's just a boarding school that does it for me. So anxiety, boarding school, great atmosphere, that's all I need. And the plot was good too. So like I said, book 3, not my favorite. I felt like this could have been a duology and it would have been great. There is a 4th book coming out in April as well, so I'm interested to see what that's like. I think it's starting a new mystery, which is probably a good thing because obviously the last one is done. But I'm excited to get back into the world of Stevie Bell. These ones. Okay, so next I have From Blood and Ash and Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So objectively, these were not like literature that like emotionally impacted me. They are on this list because I had such a good time reading them. These are like 600-page books, and I read each of them in like 2-3 hours, I think. The romance is what I am here for. They are set in a high fantasy world, and these are all over the place, but if you don't know the plot, there's like a maiden who falls in love with a guard. That's really all you need to know. There's vampires, there's lots of stuff going on, there's wolves. I can't, they're so good. I'm gonna read the 3rd book the moment that it comes out. Fairy Loot is actually doing hardcover editions of these, and I'm so excited because I do like these paperbacks, but you know, hardcovers are great. So yeah, these were just so much fun and reminded me of how enjoyable it is to read like a smutty paranormal romance, and I just loved them. So here they are on this list of the greatest works of literature that I read this year. Now I have one of the last books that I read in 2020, and I have 2 copies of it. So this is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I have the Fairy Loot edition here, which has pink edges, and then the Owl Crate edition, which I've turned inside out because it has this beautiful picture of Shanghai. And it looks cool on my bookshelf. It actually goes here, which is why the shelf is so empty. I knew that both book boxes were doing the same book, and I was like, okay, I want the items, so I'll get both books and then sell one of them. But now I have them both, and I'm like, oh, but they go so well together. I think if I hadn't liked this book as much as I did, I would probably sell one, but now I'm really into it, so I'm probably gonna keep them. Anyway, These Violent Delights is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai, and that's pretty much all you need to know. I would have read these if they were just set in 1920s Shanghai, because I think that's so fun. I've actually been to Shanghai, and it's like one of my favorite cities, so I love reading things that are set there. I find that it's really cool to be able to picture like the places that I was, because some of them are in this book. I talked a lot about this in my December wrap-up as well, but I'm just so impressed that Chloe Gong wrote these at such a young age. I think she's 21 or 22, and she's been writing since she was 13 apparently, but they're just so impressive, so engaging, and I can't wait to see where this series goes. As you can tell from these tabs, I really liked this book, and it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Still not super into this Owl Crate edition, so considering selling it and getting a regular one, honestly, because I like the ribbon, but that's pretty much it. But that's not the point. I've actually never tabbed a book before, and there were just so many poignant quotes in this that I couldn't resist. So every time I have a tab in here, it's just like a quote that spoke to me and made me go, wow. This follows a girl named Addie who makes a deal with the devil for immortality, but the catch is that everyone will forget her. This is a book that I know I'm going to reread constantly. Aside from the stunning writing, it was just so emotionally impactful. I don't know if I actually cried, I can't remember, but I still can't stop thinking about it, and I read it a couple months ago, which is really like what takes a book over the top for me. My favorite thing about this book was the way that it spoke about like legacy, the desire to be remembered, and like the concept of thinking that you're enough for the world. It was just so stunningly beautiful. I want everyone to read this, even if you're not a fantasy reader. It's like fantasy light, so I think it's a great place to start, and I can't say enough good things about this. Next up we have these stunning books. So it's The Gilded Wolves and the Silvered Serpents by Roshni Chokshi. I very clearly remember getting this in a used bookstore because I saw it and I thought, ooh, I know that author, and this is a stunning book, obviously. So I looked it up on Goodreads, and a lot of people don't like these books, and I really truly can't understand why. Like, I don't. Sometimes I get it. This time I don't. I think these books are like basically perfection. I feel the way about these books that a lot of people feel about Six of Crows. So I read Six of Crows for the first time this year as well, and I did really enjoy it. Like, I'm super excited for the TV show. I'm gonna reread them. I have the collector's edition. Like, they were great. And maybe if I hadn't read these books, those would be on this list. And I don't mean to compare them so directly because I think that that's really damaging to these books. But the attachment that people seem to feel towards the characters in Six of Crows is what I feel to the characters in these. They are just sweet cinnamon rolls, and I love them, and I would die for them. For plot, this follows a group of 6 people, which is where the comparisons to Six of Crows come in, basically trying to pull off a heist to get their place back in society. That's a very simplified way to look at it. I think that if you are interested in mythology and history, you will love these. There's a lot of it interwoven very smoothly. Like, it doesn't feel like it's kind of just being inserted into here. There's little puzzles that you can solve alongside with the gang, and you know, still, they're stunning, so that's all I needed, really. I just think that each character is fleshed out so well. The settings are amazing, and Roshni Chokshi's writing is absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with these. Anyone who doesn't like them is wrong. Just kidding, but kind of. And I would really highly recommend these. I like that I keep ending my blurb about the book with, and I would really highly recommend these. Like, obviously, they're on my best of 2020 list, but whatever. Now we have some adult romance. So this is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I did not know that a romance book could impact me this so much. These are so good. I cried at both of these. They are, like I said, adult romance, so they follow 2 sisters. There's the 3rd one for Eve Brown coming out in March, I think. This one is the enemies to lovers trope, and this one is fake dating trope. I don't know what the 3rd one's gonna be. I did like Take a Hint, Danny Brown a little bit more, but like, I still love this one and gave it 5 stars. So truly the plot of these is just that they're romances, they're falling in love, but the representation in these is amazing. There's like abuse victims, there's mental illness, there's self-worth issues, there's chronic illness, and I just think that they, again, were perfection. I will read the 3rd book immediately when it comes out. I'm so excited. I might reread these first, just for fun, even though I remember them really well. I think that these might have been some of my first adult romance novels, and I think that's where I'm at now. Like, I used to really love YA contemporaries, and still I do. Like, some of them are awesome. These just impact me more because I'm not 16, I'm 25. So a really deep story about like struggles in high school will like still impact me, but it's just not relatable to where I am right now. Whereas these characters are in their 20s, and I just connect with them so deeply. So if you're in your early 20s as well, I would get into adult romance, and I would start with these. Next up, I just have the first book in a series because I read the next 2 this year, but that is The Glass Sentence by S.E. Grove. This truly came out of nowhere. So I got the 2nd book in like a box of books that I bought from someone on Facebook Marketplace. and it was just like one price for all of them. So it came and I was like, sure, I'll read this at some point. And then I looked it up and I was like, wow, this sounds cool. So it's set in a world where there was this big catastrophe and all of the different areas of the world are in different time periods. So like some of them are in the 1400s, some of them are in the 1900s, and there's some places that they don't even know because they can't get there anymore. So Sophia is our main character, and she comes from a family of cartologists, who are just map makers, and explorers. So the plot is super expansive. These are technically middle grade, but I think that they're pretty mature. There's a lot of mature themes, and the world building is just really complex. So I think that I would have loved these when I was 12, but I love them even more now because I can kind of get into them deeper. There's a quote on the back of this one that says, "Not since Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass have I seen such an original and compelling world built inside a book." And I think that's why I keep comparing this to The Golden Compass, because it's just so, the depth of this world is incredible. Like, it feels so real and it really jumps off the page. The characters are amazing as well. There's super cool maps in here, and I'm almost on the third book right now, and it is also good. So would wholeheartedly recommend starting this series. The first book was my favorite so far, but they've all been great. This is one that I'm conflicted on because I think I've said this before, but the world building is not done very well. Like, it's an amazing world, and I'm very impressed that Sarah J. Maas came up with it. But the first 200 to 300 pages are very confusing. Like, I consider myself pretty good at dealing with fantasy worlds, sci-fi worlds, figuring out what's going on. But no idea. Like, I had to, the second time that I read this, it was way better because I at least kind of knew what was going on, you know? But anyway, sorry, this is House of Earth and Blood, which is book 1 in Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. And this is her new adult fantasy series, and this is the heavy book. It's kind of a murder mystery wrapped up into a fantasy. It follows our main character, Bryce, I think 2 years after her whole group of friends was brutally murdered. They think they put the person who did it in prison, but then they find out that it wasn't him. So she teams up with a fallen angel to find out who did it. So it's got paranormal, it's got sci-fi, the world is really, really cool. And of course, signature Sarah J. Maas, the romance is iconic. I can't wait for book 2. Again, this book is like 50% 3-star and then 50% 5-star. The ending is so emotional, and every time I get to the end, I forget how confused I was at the beginning, and I'm like, yes, 5 stars. So that's why it's on here. I have no shame, I love Sarah J. Maas. Another adult fantasy is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is another one that's really divisive. A lot of people hate this because there's no plot, which I can't disagree with. I loved this for the setting and the writing and not quite the world building, because I wouldn't say the world makes a lot of sense, but just the atmosphere. So loosely, this follows like an underground library pretty much, and a character named Zachary who finds himself in a book and goes on all these adventures. But like I said, this is my favorite because of the writing. I absolutely loved Erin Morgenstern's prose, and I'm learning that that's the kind of writing that I'm really into. Reminds me of a little bit more confusing version of Laini Taylor, and again, I mean that in the best way. So I've got her other book, The Night Circus, now, and I'm really excited to read that one. But I'm glad I started here, and it was absolutely wonderful. The next book is one that I'm surprised more people don't talk about. It is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu, and I thought that this was absolutely amazing. It's a historical magical realism book, which is definitely not what Marie Lu normally writes, but I think she did an amazing job. There's also a really good author's note in here that kind of talks about how she came up with this idea and how long she's been working on it, that I found really inspiring. But it basically follows Mozart's sister, who was also a child prodigy. I can't say that word. Clearly I'm not a prodigy. See? Prodigy every time. Anyway, Mozart's sister. And they have this little magical world that they retreat to, just kind of, like in their children's imaginations. But she is kind of stifled by their father because she's a girl and she's not going to be able to do the things that her brother is going to do. She just has to get married. So I think that Marie Lu's writing in this was a lot more poetic than in her dystopian sci-fi books, which totally makes sense. But I just thought the story was really cool. I really connected with Nannerl, who is Mozart's sister, and also it has silver sprayed edges, so you can't go wrong. This is the Owl Crate edition, and I think it's beautiful. Yeah, I think that this book needs so much more hype. If you're into historical fiction or if you're into fantasy, you would absolutely love it, and I think it is one of the best books I read this year, obviously, because it's on this list. Okay, the final book I have is actually another one that came in that random box of books and I had never heard of before. So that is The Light Between Worlds by Laura E. Weymouth. This is kind of similar to Narnia. It is a portal fantasy, but it kind of answers the question of what would happen after you came back to Earth from Narnia. So I've also seen some comparisons to the Wayward Children series, but I just thought that this was so hauntingly beautiful. The writing is really good. My one complaint would be that like half of it is in italics, like okay. This follows two sisters named Evelyn and Philippa. They ended up in a magical world, kind of similar to Narnia, and then they came back to London and nothing had changed except them. So they are really struggling with kind of being back in the regular world. The impetus for the story is that Evelyn, the younger sister, disappears, and it is a very dark story. So they're kind of thinking that she committed suicide, but also hoping that she just found her way back to the world. So it follows Evelyn and her sister in different time periods. There is a lot of like italic portions in this, which are when they were originally in the Woodlands, which is the world they go to, that I found a little bit harder to read because I just feel like when something is written in italics, it just makes me want to skip it. I don't know why. But again, this one is on here because it just stuck with me. I think about it a lot. Every time I see it on my shelf, it just like triggers emotions. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. If you're a Narnia fan, I would definitely recommend this. I think a couple of people said it was like a ripoff of Narnia, but I don't think that he controls the concept of portal fantasy, you know? Like it can be done a different way. Yeah, so lots of heartfelt messages in this book about finding your own way and being who you are. And that's the last book on my list. That is the best 15 books that I read in 2020. There are honestly so many more that I could have included on this list, and it was so challenging to whittle it down to this number. I'm glad I didn't try to rank them because it would have been truly impossible, except for Strange the Dreamer. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books. I would love to know what you thought of them. Unless you hate them, please don't tell me. And maybe you can put some of these on your reading list for 2021. Thanks for watching. Bye!